So, any questions about cost of quality? I know that was on your mind as you were enjoying your lunch. Sweat was like, oh, let me think about that. No. Cool. All right. So just do a quick check in. Jennifer Palomo.
Yes.
So just do some quick reviews here. So what are the two types of cost of quality again? Two
The
main.
cost, for the one that we were just doing right now, right? So cost of quality would be prevention costs and appraisal costs.
So the two main are cost of conformance and non-conformance as the
Oh,
highlight.
okay, sorry.
Yeah. And so what are the things under cost of conformance?
Prevention costs and appraisal costs.
There you go. And the money spent here is to
Uh, th-
avoid
Training.
failures.
Yeah.
Avoid failures. Yep. Um, Carol,
Yes.
what's the other side of cost of conformance?
The
So
other side,
yeah, when things start to fail,
cost of non-conformance.
and what are the two types?
Oh, internal failure cost and external failure cost.
Absolutely. And the money spent here is because of failure.
Okay.
Yeah. So once you start hitting failure, you move into cost of non-conformance. All right. So now let's move on to other terms you have to remember. Quality metrics. So again, quality metrics, we talked about a specific measure, right? Um, what are you trying to measure? Be it temperature, be it, time. Um, and tolerance is the quantified description of acceptable variation. Let me get to that chart. I think I have a here. So when you're talking about tolerances, you want to look at what's accepted and what's not accepted. So what is within, right? So here you have like control limits. So if the results are within, so that is, well, tolerated. And if it's outside of the ideal, you have your specification limits. It's not ideal, but we can still tolerate it outside of the specification limits, then it's out of bounds. So tolerance literally means what you can tolerate in terms of quality. Let me go back to that. Oh, hold on. Yeah. So what is acceptable, right? What is the acceptable variation? So for measurements, you typically have, like a sliding scale of we can accept measurements from like 3 mm to 5 mm. Anything outside of that we can't accept or we can't tolerate. All right. Quality audit improves quality performance. One of the things that you want to do for quality audits is make sure that you have a mixture of scheduled and random audits. What happens when you don't have random audits?
Things
People might
fall. Yeah.
slack off, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like having a family and friends over. When you know they're coming, that's when you tidy up. But if Patrick just shows up unannounced and you don't know when he's coming, so you try to, be as tidy as possible. So that's why you need both scheduled and random quality audits. All right. So manage quality. Okay, we talked about random and scheduled. Um, you want to make sure too that you have more than one person doing the quality audits. And the reason for that is you want to limit bias as much as possible. Because what, might be important for Jennifer might not be important for Victor. And so you want to, as much as possible, limit the bias of the examiner. Um, I used to, when I was working for, not for, well, VA was a client of ours. Um, I used to do like quality checks. We were in the perioperative area, and just talking to anesthesia staff and checking what they were doing and how they were charting since they didn't know who I was. It was very effective. As soon as I got, more familiar and became friends with, even as the quality assessor, we're all human beings. You tend to start to be a little lax. So like I know Kelly, I've audited Kelly 3, 4 times. The fifth time, I won't have as much rigor as I did the first or second. Does that make sense? So it's important to kind of mix things up in terms of who's doing the audits. These are some of the tools that you can use. You can do data gathering, pretty self-explanatory here. Um, Checklists, statistical sampling, questionnaires, surveys, data analysis, how's it doing, the performance, RCAs, root cause analysis. We'll talk about data representation here in a second. I have some slides here for you. Um, one of the one of the problems that we have when we're looking at quality checks is there's tendency to fix the symptom of a problem and not the root cause because the root cause takes more time. So we even, in Western medicine, we tend to focus on the symptomatology, right? So you're coughing, we'll give you something that stops the cough. And if it persists, then we start looking at root cause. But if you try to ask the why questions as soon as possible, then you might prevent, further quality issues down the road. So we mentioned this before, different things you can do. So questionnaires and surveys, again, the most important thing to remember is you want to have the surveys short and sent out to as wide of a population as possible. Um, the minute the surveys start becoming overwhelming, then people, just ignore it. Checklist, amazing way, it's what are the things that you're looking for? If it's there, you check it off. If it's not, then you find the person that you need to talk to. There's this amazing book that I highly recommend. It's called the Checklist Manifesto by Gawande. So I highly recommend this. It's a great history of how checklists, weaved its way into healthcare and how it started primarily in the aviation industry where they have redundancies and all the pilots, regardless if you're a 20-year, veteran or not, these are things that you would do is go through that checklist. So this has really saved a lot of lives, especially in the OR. Um, about 20, 25 years ago, we really had this push for doing these checklists. And I don't know if you guys know, but like, and this has been prevalent, all throughout 70s, 80s, 90s, but like early 2000s, we really started to think about, okay, how can we really decrease the amounts of wrong site, wrong patient, wrong procedure in surgery? And the best way to do that was with the checklist. And we had those called a surgical pause. And what we would do is before the surgeon would start the procedure, someone, it could be the circulating nurse, it could be anesthesia, anyone can lead the surgical pause, which is they just go over, for example, patient is Jennifer Mansourian. She's here for an appendectomy, and incision is going to be on the right side, lower right quadrant. She's allergic to this, all those things. And if anyone in the room has any objection or has heard otherwise or know otherwise, you can raise your hand and say, actually, I think she's allergic to penicillin. And then, you have to reconcile before you start the surgery. And that has saved so many injuries and so many mortalities, just that simple, you know, 30 seconds, if that surgical pause. It's an amazing tool, and simple checklist, that even to this day for aviation, they go through that checklist. And as annoying as, if anyone, you're flying out and you're in that emergency seat, right? You go through how to put your seatbelts on and how to man the door and all of that. So that's a checklist that aviation does really well. Statistical sampling. So this is where you look at a certain part of the population, right? And that small piece, representative piece, is your sample. So the larger group is called population, the smaller group is your sample. And there's a lot of different ways where you can do sampling. They won't go through it in the test, but so you can do what's called like a random sampling where, let's say Cinderella, you just go to, you look at a population and say, okay, I'm gonna just randomly select 10 people, the 10 people that I see, I'm gonna give them, this flyer. That's random sampling. Or you can do stratified sampling where you have a little bit more filters. So those are the two most common sampling, random and stratified. But you don't need to know that for the test. Just an FYI. All right. And again, guys, just stop me if you have any questions here. So performance reviews, technique used to measure, compare, actual versus planned, right? And these are some of the different methods that you can do. Um, so critical chain, so this is like for supply chain stuff, from the manufacturer to the end product. Um, earned value management. We talked about that earlier. That was like looking at, you guys still remember like the variances and the indices? That's earned value. Um, super, super random. Um, so there's a global mRNA conference in Boston in October, and they have all of big pharma from all over the world coming in, and the organizers reached out and they wanted me to talk about like how AI will affect the future of mRNA and vaccines. And so I'm like, all right, I'm more than happy to talk about that. And the other day they reached out and said, hey, can you be on the panel and talk about how, like supply chain and that whole chain of custody for vaccines and how machine learning can help with that. And like, sure, but is there anything that you want to focus on? And they wanted to focus on what's called the last mile. I don't know if you guys have heard about this. The problem with vaccines is really in the last mile, meaning, so let's say it gets to let's say Kuala Lumpur or somewhere, and then from the manufacturer all the way up to the country, it's all refrigerated, right? And as it goes into the rural areas, that last mile is typically when the temperature gets compromised. It's just the last mile problem. So, what happens when a vaccine is supposed to be refrigerated and in that last mile it's not? What do you think happens to the vaccine?
It dilutes or goes bad.
It goes bad. So, for the most part, you're just injecting, well, saline with some stuff that's no longer active, right? And so it's a huge problem in the whole vaccine supply chain. So haven't really looked into it yet, but I'm like, yeah, I'll see what's out there. So I'll be talking about that at this conference, and I'll be reaching out to some of I'm not sure if you guys have you guys attended the like the guest speaker series that we do at UCLA like once a month? Like we do a interview like a guest speaker from outside of the industry. Okay, so um I'll ask actually, let's see. Um so I'll ask Mike. It should be easy to send you guys the invite. So every month I bring in like industry experts, people who are at the top of their game from outside of healthcare to talk about how do you approach, your problems in terms of, problems you solve, your approaches, leadership, communication, things like that. And so one of the guest speakers that I had was a friend of mine who was the chief scientist for the Gates Foundation, and he's just an all-around nerd. And now he he started his own venture fund. And one of the problems he helped Bill with was the last mile problem. And I can't remember all the details, but it was some sort of like solar powered refrigeration that can be used in Africa so that you don't need batteries. It's just like this just really insane solar powered system that you don't need, like a huge surface area. And it kept the container cold enough, so that it doesn't go bad by the time it gets to the community health nurse that's about to give the vaccines to kids and whatnot. So that was his project. So I'll probably reach out to him and see what are the latest trends in that last mile. So critical chain um is very important for quality because it's that last mile before it gets to the customer where problems usually happen. Critical path method, we talked about that last time, where you're looking at all the absolute necessary steps before to go from beginning to end. And if it's on the critical path, that means that there's no float or slack. And so if, step number 3 gets moved out by a week, then the whole project gets moved out by a week. You guys remember that? So that is a critical path. Root cause analysis, we talked about that earlier. It's the main goal is to identify the cause of the problem, right? So not just the symptoms, but what is the cause. Some of the tools is failure modes and effects analysis. So I'll have actually diagrams here for you. So here's an example of a fishbone diagram, cause and effect. This was made by Ishikawa in Japan. So it's also called like the Ishikawa diagram. So as you can see here, so the head of the fish, if you will, is the problem. So product quality not matching the requirements, right? So quality is an issue. And so, all right, what are the things that affect the quality? So you can say the equipment, the process, the people. So you start with the head, right? The problem. And then you create like these, you know, the bones, if you will. And then you go around the fish and put in like the big ticket items like equipment, process, people, materials, environment, management. And then you go through each bone. So like equipment. Okay, so what are the issues with equipment? Low maintenance, we're not checking it frequent enough. It could be outdated, right? Old technology, or people aren't trained well with the equipment, so improper handling. So that could be an issue with the use of equipment. So, okay. So going back to our cost of quality, Patrick, making sure that the equipment is well maintained, is that cost of conformance or non-conformance? Making sure that equipment is well maintained.
That would be conformance.
Conformance, absolutely. Yep. Because we are trying to avoid or prevent failure. Yep. So this is a fishbone. It's a really cool method that you can use when you're trying to figure out, you know, cause and effect, and just brainstorm with the team. Any questions about the fishbone before we move on? Pretty straightforward. Okay, cool. All right. Another one is I'll make this smaller. Is called the scatter diagram. So this diagram shows the relationship between two variables. So, you know, you have like here a different variable on your x-axis and also a different variable on your y-axis. And just a quick check. So Jennifer Ng, is the y-axis the one that goes up down, or does it go left to right? Which one is the y?
Up, down.
Up down. Yep, thank you so much. So as you can see here, as you start to plot the results, then it forms, you know, some sort of relationship. You know, either they gather in one area, or in this case, it makes like a line. So it seems like there's a um inverse relationship with your inputs and the quality, or sometimes there's no correlation whatsoever. So the dots are just all over the place. So you can say that there is no relationship with the x-axis and the y-axis. So a scatter diagram is good for that, to look at the relationship with variables. If you're looking at cause and effect, you want to do fishbone. So if you're taking down notes, this would be a good, just, you know, to remind you. So write down fishbone equals cause and effect. Scatter diagram equals relationship between two variables. So if you don't remember anything, but remember that, that will help you with any questions around the charts. This is a control chart. Again, we're trying to figure out what is acceptable. So in a perfect world, all of your results would be on the center line, right? But that doesn't happen. So then you have your ideal, right? What's the ideal settings? That's going to be within your control limit. You guys see the red line? So anything in between the red line, that's your control limit. And the black lines at the edges, that's your specification limit. So, yes. Nick, which limit is your ideal? Is it control or specification? Your ideal limits.
That would be specification.
Control. So control, so the one closer to the middle is your ideal. So the red lines. So if you're not in the control, that's okay, as long as you're in the specification limit. Once you step out of the specification limit, that's when it's not acceptable. That's when you don't tolerate, right? So a control chart is a good way of measuring, where your data points are. And so going back to our example of Toyota and Ferrari, if you were to graph the results from a Toyota, more likely than not, you will have more of the data points within the control limit versus Ferrari, they're probably more in the specification limit. So Toyota has tighter controls. And when they say, you hear that a lot, right? Like they have tight controls. Tight controls actually means close to the center line. So your results are close to the center line. That's what tight controls mean. All right.
Yeah.
Alrighto. This is something that I am personally really fascinated with. And Pareto chart looks at what are the asymmetrical relationships? For example, Melissa. So on your phone, just give me a wild guess. How many contacts do you have? It's a wild guess.
Probably 300.
300. In the past week, how many calls do you think you've made? Just roughly.
5.
Oh, wow. Okay. Past month then, sorry.
All right, we'll say 25. I don't talk on the phone that much.
Yeah, no. So let's say 25. All right. So of the 25 calls that you've made, um I would wager, I would bet that most of those calls uh are for a handful of people in your phone book, right? So what Pareto is saying that in almost any relationship, around 20% of, in this case, the phone numbers you have in your phone book account for 80% of the actual calls, right? So that is the Pareto chart. It looks at the asymmetrical relationships. So Michelle Bangara, as you guys know, she is a middle school teacher. And so if you look at all of the, you know, issues that she's had with students, let's say, either complaints or students that are picking fights or whatnot. If you look at all of that number, all of the complaints put together, they're probably from just a handful of students, right? So if you guys remember back in school, the quote unquote problem kids are just, the 2 or 3 in the class that causes, 80% of the ruckus, right? So almost anywhere you look, there's this asymmetrical relationship. If you look at, for example, YouTube, right? 80% of the revenue generated by YouTubers are made by maybe 1% of the YouTubers, the Joe Rogans of the world. So you see this relationship almost anywhere. So let's pick a, let's say for example, okay, so we're heading towards the end of the year. So there's going to be an influx of patients coming in through the emergency room. Of, let's say, 100 new patients coming into the emergency room, chances are that most of them are from maybe a handful of issues. So now we're heading towards the end of the year. The bulk of them are probably flu related, right? So of the 100 people coming in, you probably have like 5 different causes. That's, is the culprit for about 80% of the patients coming in. Let's Pete, think of either a sector or an example, and we'll see if we could find an asymmetrical relationship.
Oh, you just want me to throw out the sector?
Yeah. Or an example, let's say restaurant or whatever comes to mind, and let's see if we can find an asymmetrical.
You already took school, and that was just on the forefront of my mind because I just picked up my children. So let's go with restaurants because I am getting hungry.
Oh, there you go. So restaurants. So in a restaurant, 80% of the orders are probably from 20% of the menu, right? So if
Yep.
it's right, so if it's like a Mexican restaurant, chances are it's the tacos, the quesadillas, the burritos. That 5 or 6 is probably 80% of all the orders, even though the menu is maybe 40 items. So yeah, so that's an example of asymmetrical relationship. So if you guys are interested in this topic, there's this book called Black Swan um by this gentleman called Nassim Taleb. It's an amazing book that looks at a lot of the asymmetrical relationships, either personally or throughout history. So if that's your jam, pick up the book Black Swan by Nassim Taleb. All right. Control product quality. So we talked a little bit about, things you can do to prevent failure. So that is inspections, detect quality errors. Pareto diagram that we just talked about. Oh yeah, no worries, Kelly. Thanks for letting me know. Flow charts. Again, you're trying to look for where can the failure come from, and as much as possible, try to either prevent it, right, or correct it as it happens. So, all right. Okay, so that is quality management for the most part. We're gonna hit on a few more quality as we go through some of the other modules, but for the most part, that's the bulk of that's 80% of what we'll be talking about in terms of quality. Any questions before we proceed to the next topic? All right.
Yeah, I
Yep.
have a question about like the um relationship between like the scatter diagram and then the one after the scatter diagram. Like, can
Yeah.
you apply those in real life as a project manager, like what you would use those for?
Yeah. So, depends on the project. So, realistically, what I use a lot is this one.
Mm-hmm.
So, what problem are we trying to solve? That's the head. And what
Right.
are the factors that contribute to that problem? And then you go through, what are the factors within that vertical? So that's something I use a lot. Scatter diagram, not too much, unless I'm doing like some sort of quality project where we're trying to look at, let's say, for example, uh, like complaints, like patient complaints, for example. And we just look, is there any relationship between, the complaints and, I don't know, let's just say
Staffing.
age here or
Okay.
department or whatever. So, but I rarely use this. If you're in manufacturing, you
Uh-huh.
would use this every day because you're looking at widgets. So you're creating something, you're making, prototypes or samples, or there's a physical component that's coming out, or you're making let's say medications. So you want to see, let's say you're let's say you're um doing, let's say, ibuprofen, 500 milligrams, and you want to see, then you get sample tablets, and then you actually look at the concentration of those sample tablets. So is it 455? Is it 500? Is it 505? And then, if it's perfect, obviously it's in the center line. And if it's below, then you start, mapping it out. If it's above, you start mapping it out. So if you're doing like manufacturing, yeah, the control chart is going to be your best friend.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Pareto, I use this a lot when you're coming in and trying to figure out, okay, which problem should I tackle first, or which problem has the biggest bang for my buck, right? So if I'm doing some sort of turnaround, um, let's say a community hospital that I helped with in Northern California, it's a small 200-bed hospital. And I was brought in to help mostly with, technology projects and issues. Um, but I reported to, this was weird because the CEO wanted me to look at the problems with the projects, not just in IT, but overall. And she was just really frustrated that a lot of the initiatives that they were doing um weren't happening either on time or on budget, things like that, or they weren't really getting, the benefit that they wanted from these projects. So then I used Pareto to figure out, okay, um, tell me the 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 projects that come to mind that were just an absolute failure, right? And then she said water boiler. And then she said um it was some sort of supply chain stuff. Um it was no, central supply, not supply chain. It was central supply issues. And another one was like heating issues in some of the rooms. Either it's like too hot or too cold. Anyway, long story short, like 4 out of the 10 problems were related in some shape or form to facilities, right? So of all the problems that this hospital was encountering, the bulk of which came from facilities. So I put my energy into figuring out what was going on with facilities. So that's where Pareto would come into play. Yeah. So cool. Hope that was helpful, Melissa. So these are some of the now, if you're working on a project and you're trying to figure out, what is the best way to represent the data, or what is the best tool I can use, please reach out to myself or to Mike, and we can, you're not alone in this. Let us help you figure out the best approach for representing the data, because if you can tell the story in a way that's digestible, you're halfway through, right? The battle. A lot of the issues occur when people are looking at the same problem in different ways, or are looking at uh, a partial view of the problem, or just not understanding where things are at. So data representation is a great way to pull people together. So at a minimum, you're defining the problem the same way. So yeah, please reach out, and I hope that we can, help you guys with the right data representation. All right, Jeffrey.
So with data representation,
Yep.
I imagine like there are ways to automate the chart from being populated, but is it more automation like reporting off of Tableau or things like that, or is it a lot of manual work for the PM to kind of create those charts and track? Like what's kind of typical and what are the trends around data representation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So here at UCLA, we use Tableau a lot. So a lot of that data visualization is done automatically. You have to do some upfront building out, right, of it. But once you have the build out, then as you update the data, then Tableau does the visualization for you. So but I think the thing to remember both for the test and in your practice is there's no one representation that is better than others. What makes it better is, does it make sense for the people looking at it? So um we're helping this new hospital in Philadelphia, and I was meeting with the executive team that is trying to take a look at they're trying to build this new tower, and they're trying to put together a deck and it kind of visualize things. And the question I had was, what are they using right now? How are they visualizing their own information today? Because the more that you can map to what's familiar, the easier it is for them to comprehend. So some institutions absolutely love like the traffic sign, right? Green for good, yellow for there's an issue, red for there's a problem. Others like to use either check marks, green check mark, or red X's. Others like the groupings. So all of the good up on top, all of the bad in the middle, or needs attention, and all of the reds at the bottom. So whatever it is that they're used to, adapt to that. So the learning curve for understanding what your graph means significantly is shortened. So there is no one that's better than the others. It's whatever is easier to digest for people.
Thanks, Ian. And actually kind of trying not to go off topic, but there's the idea of qualitative versus quantitative analysis. And I can imagine like for smaller organizations, right, this whole like the data representation and doing all this work to ensure that there's quality is necessary or definitely helpful. But when you have smaller projects or smaller organizations, they might not have, I would think they're not going to go through the trouble necessarily to kind of build out these reports and such. They're sort of just going off of the what I say qualitative analysis. Just I don't know whatever that might mean. Does it look right? What are you guys seeing? It's versus like all the specific data. Is that also something that you typically see like a difference between bigger and smaller organizations or?
In broad strokes, yes. But you'd be surprised how many billion-dollar organizations run off of Excel with like just uh you know values that auto change colors.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so you'd be surprised. Not all, and again, it's different, pockets within the organization, right? So every big organization is just the sum of small sub-organizations within that company, like UCLA, right? If you look at, for example, pathology group, um, they might still be using a lot of Excel versus, let's say, the analytics team, right? OHIA. So they're probably heavy, not probably, they are. They're heavy Tableau and Power BI users. So every big enterprise is comprised of smaller enterprises that have their own subcultures and tools that they use and what they're used to. But broad strokes, you're absolutely right, Jeffrey.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. All right. So cool. Switching gears, I'm going to talk more about integration management. And when we talk about integration, we're looking at the project from beginning to end. We're looking at initiation, planning, execution, monitor and control, all the way to closing, right? So we're looking at discovery phase, we're looking at assessment, we're looking at planning, and tying it all together so that there's a cohesive, approach to the project that you're doing. And so that's what integration management is. So you want to make sure that you're not just doing parts of a project as silos. Everything is connected to, well, all of the different aspects of the project. So as you're starting the project, if you guys still remember from last week, if it's an agile project, you start with a product vision. What are we trying to solve, or what new things are we trying to bring about? And that follows throughout the project. And towards the end, the question is, were we able to materialize this vision, right? So that's the through line. Start with a vision, and in closing, the question is, were we able to materialize or make it, bring about the vision that we had in mind when we first started this? So that through line is your integration management, making sure that everything you do is tied to it. And that's why again, I'm just going to use this children's example because it's top of mind. And as we're looking at, so how do we think about building this 22-story tower? My question is always, what is your North Star? What are the things that, as you make these big decisions, you always have to think about? And for me, that would include, the safety and well-being of the children, the patient, um, safety and well-being of the family, and also how do we empower the providers that are helping the patient and the family? Like those three things should be top of mind in all of the decisions. So having that as your North Star ensures that, your project is integrated. Like you're not just doing things for the sake of doing things or implementing things because they're cool and they're the latest technology. How does it tie into your why? How does it tie into the benefits realization, the value that this project or initiative seeks to bring about? So the document, that pulls it all together is your project management plan. And this looks very familiar, I hope, with all of the lessons you guys have with Michelle. Um, this is the entire approach of version 6, where everything is tied to the processes. So as you can see here, so these are the different processes, and then you have the inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs. So for me, this was super helpful because, I like thinking in algorithms, and so this made life so much easier for me. But not everyone, thinks that way. And so version 7 was made to be more conversational. And so, yeah, so less of a like a technical manual and more of how do we actually use these things. But nonetheless, the principles are the same. So for integration management, you develop the charter, right? Develop the plan, you direct and manage the project work. This is where you're assigning things to your team, manage project knowledge, all the documentation that you're creating as you're doing the project. You're monitoring the project, is it aligned with what we're planning? Change requests, as things come about, you need more people, more funding, timelines need to change. You go through integrated change control, and towards the end, you close the project. So from developing the charter all the way to close project or phase, that is your integration management. So beginning to end.
Ian, is it possible to zoom into that,
Oh yeah, hold on.
please?
Absolutely. There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So this should be in the PDF of version 6 as well.
Right.
So be very grateful that you don't have to memorize this. We had to create what was called a brain dump, where we would memorize all 47 processes and then all of the primary inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs. So the first 30 minutes or so of the test, we were just writing everything out on a piece of paper so you don't forget. As you get through, hour 3 and your brain's already fried. So yeah, thank God that's no longer how the tests are done. But there you go. All right. Oh, all good, Kelly? Okay,
Yes, thank you.
no worries. Wait. So PMIS, this is the tool that you use. A lot of organizations use Microsoft Project. Here at UCLA, we have UPlan or Clarity PPM. Other departments, still use projects, some Excel, some Trello. Others even have Monday.com, so I'm told. So there's different systems that we have. But if you guys are not using UPlan, please email myself and Mike, and we'll see if we can go down the discovery path to see if your department can start using this, because they already bought, the licenses and whatnot. So just email us if you're not using UPlan as your project management information system. All right, so project management plan components. So these are the primary baselines. So scope, schedule, cost, and these are the subsidiary plans. You don't need to memorize this, thank God, anymore. So under the project management plan, you have the scope, you have requirements, schedule, cost, quality, and then there's other components like project processes and whatnot. So PMI was pretty rigid before as to what should be included in a project management plan, but now they've relaxed a lot and understood that what makes sense for like construction projects would be different for a computer related project or technology project, would be different for let's say that you're planning like a big event at UCLA. So that's a very different plan. Let's say you're organizing a heart walk, right? That's a very different plan than you're building a 3-bed, two bath. So to accommodate for that, they've made this more as a recommendation and less as something you need to memorize. So it's a good change. Tools and techniques, expert judgment, of course, meetings, so gather data, so nothing new here. Leverage interpersonal and team skills. So I hate that we call these skills soft skills, because there is nothing soft about learning how to deal with people. it is a full contact sport. And if you don't develop the trust, if you're not consistent in the way you communicate and follow through, if people can't depend on you, then the project will fall apart. It's just not happening. So in my mind, interpersonal skills is way more important than IQ and technical skills combined. You can learn technical skills. You can pick up JavaScript and Python. Um, and for the most part, you don't need, Elon level IQ. Um, most of the jobs, even surprisingly, even the hard jobs, it's more a function of repetition than anything. If you talk to neurosurgeons, it's a function of doing it over and over again that makes them better versus the fact that they've memorized, all the different parts of the brain or things like that. But interpersonal skills is what will get you further. There was this 20-year study of Harvard Business School graduates, and they looked at the top 10%, the middle, and then the bottom 10%. Guess who had the most success in life after 20 years? And when I say success, not just financial, but low divorce rates, health, all of that. Guess which group, which cohort was the most successful? Top 10, middle, or bottom 10?
Middle.
Bottom.
Middle. It was the middle.
No.
Melissa, why do you think the middle succeeded the most?
I think that the stress of the top 10 is probably too significant and makes them unsuccessful. And I think the bottom 10 probably don't care enough or don't have the appropriate skills to be successful.
You're spot on. Another thing to add to that is the top 10% really struggled to communicate with the lower 90. And if you cannot communicate, if you cannot simplify things for the bottom 90, you're on an island. You're on an intellectual island. And almost all significant work is done by a team, right? This idea of a self-made millionaire or self-made business person is a myth. No one succeeds by themselves. There's your teachers, your coaches, your mentors, your team members, the banks that helped you out, people along the way. So the middle of the pack knew how to manage the bottom 10% and also knew how to manage up. And a lot of life is managing to the people that report to you and also managing how you communicate to senior leadership. So it was that knowing that there was, that top 10% that they also need to figure out, okay, how do I approach Pete, for example? He's wicked smart, very technical. How do I approach Pete? Or, the bottom 10%, okay, how do I break this down so that the bottom 10% can understand? So, I'm sure you guys have heard of this book. So this is not breaking news, but Crucial Conversations is one of those books that I listen to every so often. There's just so much amazing information that comes from it. And one of the things that I'm personally working on is setting clear expectations and setting clear boundaries. Especially in healthcare, there's a lot of burnout. And burnout comes from not setting clear boundaries. And what's amazing is that people always say, "Oh man, what happened to Kenny? Like he got burned out." What? He's always so nice and so accommodating, and he's always so helpful, and he's always there to volunteer, and he's first in line to help out. Well, that is exactly the formula for burnout because you don't set clear expectations and clear boundaries. And so part of interpersonal skill is helping the team set clear boundaries amongst each other. And also, if you look at the project, oh, thanks, Jeffrey, for letting me know. Oh, Victor, you took the class. Cool. Um, for your stakeholders. So, Melissa, I'm the VP of, I don't know, facilities, and I tell you, hey, I heard you're working on this project. I would love if you can throw in this feature that would really help facilities, right? Now, if Melissa just says, "Oh man, yeah, I can totally see where you're coming from, Ian. Um, let me see if I could squeeze that in." That squeezing that in without going through the proper channels is gonna hurt the project. So that boundary setting is just, man, the more I look into the topic of burnout, the more I look into the topic of organizational conflicts, talk about asymmetrical relationships, the Pareto chart, lack of boundaries and lack of clear expectations is almost at the root of every issue. Because if people don't know your boundaries, they are bound to step over it because they don't know. And if you try to always accommodate, eventually you're going to get burned out, and then the entire team suffers. So, and this ties into everything we talked about. You guys remember the team charter that we talked about before? As you start, your group, like, okay, so how are we gonna handle escalations? How do we manage team meetings if, let's say, Kelly, speaks 90% of the time and no one else can talk? How do we manage that? So all of those things are around interpersonal and team skills and boundaries. So I really, really encourage you to review over the weekend your interpersonal relationships and look at um clear is kind. Oh, that's beautiful, Melissa. Clear is kind. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Um it's funny you say that because um I I use clarity is kindness a lot, which is, pretty much the same thing. And it's true. And what's amazing is that there are ways of saying no that's not offensive. You can say you're invited to a birthday party and you're not available or you don't want to go because you have other things you need to do. You can say, "Oh man, that's amazing. I'm sure it's going to be a great event. Unfortunately, I have to attend to other things, but please enjoy the party. I could send a gift or something." And guess what? If that was Pete's party, it's still going to be amazing, right? Without you there. So, um, just being able to know your boundaries and setting it and say, "Yep, I can do this or can't do that." And the world continues to turn. All right. Speaking of which, managing change. So for the test, I want you to know the difference between, we didn't take a break. Are you guys okay with just powering through and we could maybe end a little early? We'll just continue, or you guys need a break? Power through?
Yeah, looks like
I'm
we're
okay to power through.
Okay,
Yeah,
power
maybe
through and
early.
yeah, because we're almost at the halfway point, which is pretty darn good. Configuration management plan and change management plan. So for the test, configuration management plan focuses on artifacts under configuration control. I know that sounds kind of redundant, but it truly is about items that are, well, configurable. Items that what's a better way of saying this? So let's say that you're working on technical requirements and you're trying to figure out, okay, what is the best way of doing this? That's under configuration management. What is the best way of doing this? Now, if let's say Kinney wants to add something net new, well, that's not about configuring existing. That's about adding. So now you're moving into the realm of change management. So if you're just trying to figure out the best approach to do something, the best approach to, creating the dashboard, that's configuration management. If you're asking for a net new dashboard, that's change management. Does that make sense, Kelly? So let's say cardiology group, they want a streamlined way of looking at patient flow in the cath lab, right? So you already have the existing data. They just want you to figure out a better way of presenting this information because it's really crowded, it's busy, it's hard to figure out. Is that configuration management or is that change management?
It'd be configuration.
Configuration. Now, if they ask for a separate dashboard that deals with new data sets, i.e., they want an inventory of all the different cardiac catheters that they're using, and they want to see, top utility to least utilize cardiac catheter. Is that configuration management or change management?
Change management.
Change management. The key here is existing or not. If it's existing and you're just fixing and changing, you're in configuration management. If it's net new, you're in change management. So, so that's the biggest difference. Does that make sense?
I would think it'd be the other way around, but okay.
So
The
if you're,
configuration would be something new. But no, you're saying it's different. That
yeah,
change
so
is new.
yes. So think of it as, another way to look at it is, do I need to ask someone's approval or permission? So if you're asking for an approval or permission, that's in change management. If you're just, reconfiguring, I'm trying to look for a different word, moving things around that's existing, you're in configuration management. So, um,
And you said that if something is changing or new, then it's changed, right? And if it's existing or moving around, it's configuration.
yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, um, yes, that. So if and a lot of times too, let's say for the question, if you're putting in like a change management request, like so let's say you need more time, you need more resources, you're changing the scope. Is that configuration management or change management? More time, more resources,
Change management.
change management.
Change.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yep. And so anything that affects your baseline is more likely than not change management. Awesome. So when you're putting together your change management plan, who can propose a change? Is it anyone in the organization? Is it just a group of people? Is it just the managers? What is the process? Do they get a ticket number? Do they get a change request number? Where does it go to? How often does this team meet? All of those things are part of the change management plan, right? So these are things that you want to figure out before you have change requests. So I'll keep you guys posted with this whole construction thing, because as you can imagine, it's gonna be wild with all of the requests yeah. And just as important as what you do with change requests that are approved, is what do you do with change requests that are not approved? Aside from informing, does it stay in a queue? Can you resubmit after 3 months? Like, what do you do with that list? Okay, so project management plan. So what are the two things to remember again for the test for project charter? The first one is already here. This is a high level, right? High level document.
Yeah.
And the second one starts with the letter A. Authorizes. So it authorizes the PM to start the project. Yeah. All right. So here's a new topic that we haven't talked about. In terms of agile projects, there's this, idea or concept of disciplined agile, which focuses on the best way of working for your team. So write this down. For disciplined agile, the focus is on best way of working. So there's, a lot of things that goes into it, but for the purposes of the test, you just need to remember the focus of disciplined agile is the best way of working. And so Scrum is a framework underneath Agile, right? That focuses on the fastest way of providing value. And it's usually used in software development. So that would be your Scrum. And so for the test, safe, scaled, agile framework, this is usually used for enterprise scale. So if it's a big scale project, it's safe. And if discipline agile, it's best way of working. And I don't see this a lot, the scrum of scrums, but it's basically how can you provide value as fast as possible. So all right. So you just need to remember the key words for these things. So now we're moving more into the execution phase of things. All right. And for today, we'll get to 1 second. Where is that? 64. Yeah, so we'll see if we can get to 64 today. All right. So a lot of these things we've guys, give me 2 seconds. Sorry about that, guys. So for plan and management, so a lot of these terms we've covered already. Your statement of work, procurement management plan, source selection criteria. I'm trying to see if there's anything that new here. Oh, bidders conference. We haven't talked about the bidders conference. And this is an old school idea wherein anyone bidding on a contract or quote, what you would do is before you would physically have to be in a location, and then you would sign up, and you know, if you're not there, then you don't get the information about, you know, what you're bidding on. Now, what you need to remember is that if any of the vendors ask a question, um, everyone needs to get the answers. So that's the main thing for the bidders conference. So the goal is to be able to share the information with everyone. All right. So things to remember for procurement strategy, you know, how are you going to deliver, right? What are the different contract types? And this would be your fixed contract that we talked about, and also your cost type contracts. And we'll talk about procurement phases a little bit later. So this is just an example of a solution delivery phase where you plan, you design, implement, test, train, and all of that. So you don't need to memorize this. This is just an example. Here's an example of alternatives analysis. You guys remember this from last time, wherein you're looking at, you know, do we buy it or do we make it? So this is a problem that healthcare organizations had, you know, in the early 2000s, where they thought that, you know what, we'll just create our own electronic medical record. And Kaiser was one of this. See Melissa smiling. Um, and we had to learn the hard way that, guys, this isn't what we're good at. And so now no one is attempting to do that. Everyone is either going through, oh, there you go. So you've seen the growing pains, Melissa, of, you know, the homegrown type of electronic medical records, which, you know, was super painful.
We
So
had
now we
that
know
here
that,
too.
what was it?
We had that here at UCLA too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so the key here is if it's not in your skill set, go out and buy it. Don't try to do this yourself, you know? And so no one is trying to make their EMR nowadays. So it's the same thing with, you know, do you use local resources or do you get consultants and contractors? If it's not part of your skill set, get a professional. Professionals are expensive, but amateurs cost a fortune. 1 second. All right. Statement of work. Is anyone not familiar with statement of work? You guys heard of statement of work? So it's a description of product, services, or results. Basically, what are you going to be doing, right? What are you going to be providing? And so for the most part, you have high level, the summary, the scope, deliverables, fees, when you're going to pay them, all of that is in your statement of work. Procurement management plan, how are you going to go about finding the resources, right? Will you acquire them? Is it going to be outside of your organization or within? And different procurement management, depending on how big the project is, you can have a straightforward 1 to 2 page or a very elaborate one, especially if you're doing like construction projects. Different things to think about for your source selection criteria, overall life cycle costs, not just the implementation costs, but what are the recurring costs? What are the warranties? What are things that you need to buy, over 5 years, for example? Understanding the needs. So all of these things you need to think about as you're looking at which vendor should we select. So qualified vendors, you want to look at their history as well. The company could be new, but look at the team that's, comprising their leadership team. Have they done this before? Is this within their, wheelhouse? We talked about the bidders conference. Again, most important thing is that if one person asks the question, the answer is shared with everyone. All right. So if you need to go outside of the organization, that's when you engage with your procurement team. Again, don't try to do this by yourself. We have an amazing team at UCLA. So reach out to your procurement person. If you don't know that, you can reach out to me and I can connect you. Supply and contracts. So these are the different contract types that we talked about, fixed price, cost reimbursement. So in terms of the risk, who bears the risk for fixed price? You guys remember? Is it the buyer or the seller? Who incurs the risk? Fixed price.
Seller,
I would guess the seller.
The seller. Yes, yes, yes. How about for cost reimbursement and time and material?
the buyer.
The buyer. Yep, you got it. All right. Trying to look for anything we haven't covered yet. So components of the contract, yep. Who's responsible for what? Payment terms, we talked about that. Talked about this. So agile contracts, cap time and materials, you can say, yep, I'll give you time and materials, but up to 500,000. So that's an example of cap. Target cost contracts, this is where you have a goal that you're shooting for, right? But it's not necessarily fixed as a cap. And incremental delivery is, as we go along, I'm going to pay you. So that's the difference between those. So control procurement processes, what are the, processes you have in place to make corrections if there are any issues? So let's say for invoicing, how do you fix that? Accounts payable is usually, in that particular example, person you would talk to. Contract change control system. So any changes in the contract, you want to have a way to monitor that so that there aren't any disputes at the end. And these are the different types of contract change. So administrative changes, non-substantive, contract modifications. This is, you're changing terms, supplemental agreements. If there's any addendums, constructive changes the buyers may have caused. So anytime that there are any actions that were expected, did not happen, that's under this one. And then, of course, termination of contract. One thing to remember for California, we have termination for convenience. So just need to give 30 days. If it doesn't work out for you, you can terminate the contract in California. Legal disputes, these are the things that you typically have to think about. The warranty, you know, is it a 1-year warranty, 5-year warranty, waiver? This is the giving up of the right. Breach of contract, if you're not, doing what you're expected to do. And a cease and desist, hopefully you never have to give this. This is when you tell the vendor, like, nope, we don't want your services. Please do not be on the premises again. Handling disputes. So arbitration, even before that, talk to the stakeholder, right? Before you bring in legal, see if you can manage this yourself. Because once you bring in legal, then it becomes a legal conversation and no longer a project or stakeholder related conversation. And it's so hard to untangle once you have the lawyers involved. And last for today, managing suppliers and contracts. There's a lot that we covered about procurement, but at the end of the day, you're dealing with another human being. So treat that person as another human being, right? Tell me what is wrong with our situation and how can we fix it together? It's not about win-lose, it's about win-win, because you need your partner, be it a vendor, a contractor, to work with you. Because at the end of the day, win-lose is not sustainable. And that really is at the heart of all of the procurement topics. How do you have a good relationship with your vendors, suppliers, manufacturers, so that you can get to where you want with the help of these outside resources? And as we said, we'll finish at 64. And before we go, thank you so much, guys, for today. As usual, let's do our 3 shares and we'll let you guys go for today.
I say the first one is cost of conformance and cost of non-conformance.
Thanks, Kenny.
Yes.
Which one is about failure?
Failure is cost of non-conformance.
Awesome.
That's when you're paying for the failure.
2 more.
Paying for the
Yep. for not conforming. Absolutely right.
Fishbone diagram. I'd never heard of that before.
Oh, nice. What's another term, Chris, for fishbone?
Cause and effect.
Starts with an I. Yep, that's true. The guy who founded it.
Oh,
Japanese food. Anyone? Ishikawa. So Ishikawa diagram. That's another word for it. Don't worry, it won't be on the test. And last one, last share for the day.
Disciplined, agile,
Disciplined, agile, and the focus is
on the best way of working.
best way of working. The wow. Awesome. Guys, thank you so much for your time and patience. And I will see you next Friday. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank
Bye-bye.
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Thank
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too.